We've never witnessed that level of coordination to destroy an ex-president and future candidate.
No, and yet he is still standing.
People are very, very critical of Trump because he's taking these hard actions, but they're in response to a toxic tumor that was created by Joe Biden. And we could use that metaphor almost to everything, from crime to DEI to energy, etc.
In just 6 months, our borders have been secured, military recruitment is surging, and America's adversaries are suddenly on the defensive. Gender madness, child sex changes, and DEI are out the window, and so-called elite universities are being held to account for fostering rampant anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism. And now, the corrupt deep state in D.C. is on the verge of being exposed in ways that will shake our nation. Folks, that's just a very small sampling of what's unfolded over President Trump's first half year back in office. In just 6 months, we've gone from a death spiral of socialism, secularism, and separation to a return of the American bedrocks of faith, family, and freedom, not to mention the return of plain common sense. But the fight for the very soul of America is just beginning, and many difficult battles still lie ahead, both at home and abroad. Joining us now to break it down is renowned historian, best-selling author, and senior fellow at the Hoover Institution, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson. Victor, always great to see you. And hey, you for years were on the front lines of calling out this Russia collusion hoax. And now, talk about vindication. Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, releases information about these declassified documents, Victor, showing that this hoax started at the very top of the Obama administration with President Obama himself. What's been your take on these stunning revelations that we've seen over the past few days?
Well, it was always very strange in 2016 during the campaign of that year, and also during Trump's first few months in office. Hillary Clinton would always talk about 17 intelligence agencies have concluded that Donald Trump was colluding with the Russians. And then we heard James Clapper and John Brennan say that, but we never got any of the assessments. In other words, we never had any hard data. We were just told that that was an interpretation of what these subordinate agencies had said. And now, of course, when Joe Biden left office, we have the raw data that these 17 intelligence agencies had actually reported to James Clapper and John Brennan that they didn't find any actionable collusion at all, and that people who had been apprised by Brennan and Clapper, Barack Obama, and then by extension, candidate Hillary Clinton, and then private citizen Hillary Clinton later, they were giving us this false narrative that he colluded because of 17 intelligence. But now we find out that all that was a lie, that these agencies had never found any collusion. And the only mystery now was Barack Obama, as a lame duck president, saying to these people in the transition, Clapper, and by extension Comey, but also Brennan, please ignore these assessments of these agencies and give me what I want? Or were they misleading Obama, or were they both colluding? It's hard to know.
Yeah. How big of a scandal is this, Victor, in the annals? You're a great historian, of course, in the annals of American history. If this is indeed the case, what Tulsi Gabbard just laid out, and perhaps goes to the very top of the Obama administration, how big of a scandal would this be in terms of historically, number one? And number two, what about accountability? Would we see someone like a Brennan, a Clapper, or these people who could be facing even prison time?
Yeah, the strange thing about this is that it was an effort in 2016 to destroy the Trump campaign. And we even have Dutch intelligence intercepted Russian intelligence known to Clapper and Brennan. And the Dutch said that the Russians are weird. I mean, they don't know what's going on because they're being blamed from collusion by Hillary Clinton. And they did tap into Hillary Clinton's, but they didn't know because they had not colluded with Donald Trump. They were mystified why she was saying that. And the only thing they could come up with is she was trying to hide the fact that she had exposed her email. So what I'm getting at, it was all through the campaign. But what was really unique is when he started his tenure, it didn't stop. In other words, as a parting shot, Obama unleashed Comey and Brennan. and Clapper. And as private citizens, they went on MSNBC, CNN. Uh, Comey was still, as you know, FBI director, and that resulted in Robert Mueller, 22 months, $40 million that ate up the first 2 years of the Trump administration. And eventually, I mean, it essentially paralyzed it. So it was,
Yeah.
we've never seen that concentrated effort to destroy a campaign and then to destroy a presidency. And yet there was no evidence ever that there was, the Steele dossier had no, it was never certified, it was never confirmed, and it was mostly point by point rejected, and yet these people went on television and in the public day after day, and Comey, as FBI director, kept insisting. And then finally, very quickly, Comey lied, or essentially 245 times to the House Intelligence. He just said a committee, he said, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't remember. Then he leaked a classified conversation with the president to the New York Times via an intermediary. Clapper lied under oath to the Senate when he said the NSA doesn't spy on people. Brennan lied twice when he said that he didn't tap into Senate staffer computers, and there were no collateral damage of civilian casualties from our Predator attack. So all of them had a record of not being truthful and often under oath.
Yeah. It was a dark chapter in American history, and there must be accountability. There must be consequences for what
Yes.
happened. It was a relentless campaign of deceit and lies, Victor, as you just laid out. Hey, about a minute left before the break, then you will be right back.
Yeah.
The Russia collusion hoax, indictments, impeachments, bogus all around. Can you talk real quick about the resilience of Donald Trump through all this? It's really been amazing to watch.
Yeah, it is. As soon as Mueller was finished, remember, then we had the bogus first impeachment where Vindman hadn't even, he didn't even report it. He just called up his friend Ciaramella and said, hey, would you be the whistleblower? And he never even heard the conversation. Zelensky said there was nothing wrong. He was on the other end. And then we went right into the laptop disinformation that really affected the 2020 election. Then, of course, 93 indictments by 5 different court hearings. We had Trump taken off the ballot, at least the attempt to, in 25 states. They raided Mar-a-Lago. So we've never witnessed that level of coordination to destroy an ex-president and future candidate.
No, and yet he is still standing. Victor, at the top, I laid out just some of President Trump's accomplishments during his first half year back in office. What's your report card for the first 6 months of this second term for Donald Trump?
Well, I think the economy, if you look at the May and June, the latest figures on inflation, job creation, income savings rates, revenues, they defied all expectations. Even the Wall Street Journal in March that had forecasted rough times has now readjusted almost everything. The 2 biggest things, though, I think that are astounding is we were told you could not close the border without comprehensive immigration reform, and nobody in their right mind ever thought there would be virtually 0 illegal entries, and already 1 million people self-deporting in the first 6 months. The other one is the military under Biden said that you could not really recruit people to existing levels that were required. We were 45 to 55,000 recruits short. They cited gangs, obesity, drugs, competition with private industry, and here we are again, 6 months, and all the recruitment uh, levels that had been set by prior administrations have been either met or exceeded. So those were really astounding achievements.
Yeah. You know, you just wrote a great piece on, folks, victorhanson.com, by the way. Check it out, all Victor's great work. But you wrote a great piece basically saying that President Trump is conducting chemotherapy right now in the United States after 4 years of Joe Biden. Talk more about the sea change that we've seen. I mean, in an instant, we went from madness, and then President Trump is sworn in, and things are coming back around to sanity and common sense. It's really been remarkable to behold what he's accomplished in just 6 months. Talk more about that sea change. And again, as you said, he really is conducting a chemotherapy of sorts after years of madness that took root here.
Yeah, I use that metaphor because people don't like chemotherapy. It's very toxic and it can be dangerous, but it's very easy to let in 10,000 people a day. All you have to do is, just let them in. but it's very hard to find them in a country of 340 million, especially when you have 600 sanctuary jurisdictions. So it's very hard, and it's easy to be critical of the hard task of finding people who broke the law and following the law and returning them to their homelands. But it's very easy to break the law and let them in. The same thing about deterrence. It's very easy just to leave Afghanistan and $50 billion in munitions. It's very hard to convince the Iranians, the Russians, the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, all of our enemies that were serious after we essentially destroyed deterrence. We had attacks weekly against our installations in Syria during the Biden administration and Iraq, and he did very little. So I use that term as that sometimes people are very, very critical of Trump because he's taking these hard actions, but they're in response to a toxic tumor that was created by uh, Joe Biden. And we could use that metaphor almost to everything from crime to DEI to energy, et cetera.
Yeah, Victor, very well said. And by the way, in terms of the border crisis, you've been documenting that for years. You've been on the front lines living in California, and stunning. We now have the most secure border probably in American history, and that's saying something after the madness of the past 4 years. The return of peace through strength, something you've written about. Under Donald Trump, I guess we'd call it the Trump doctrine. Iran, obviously, humiliated during the 12-day war, and Trump ordering the strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, taking a tougher line against Russia now. It seems that our enemies are back on notice, and America once again is filling the role as leader of the free world. Can you talk more about the peace through strength doctrine that Trump has put back into place?
Yeah, I think he's misunderstood. People on the left said he was a neo-isolationist. He was withdrawing from alliances and our traditional leadership role in the world. Others said that he was a nation builder or neoconservative interventionist. He was neither. He was a Jacksonian. He just said, no better friend, no worse enemy. We're going to protect our interests and our close allies' interests. And from time to time, whether it's in his first term dealing with Soleimani or Baghdadi or ISIS or the Wagner Group, or in the second administration dealing with the Iranian nuclear installations, at certain times he will use force in a cost of benefit analysis that's in the interest of the West, and especially the United States. At other times, he does not want endless wars and boots on the ground in the Middle East, et cetera. So he's been mischaracterized, but you can see that he's really split the difference. He went in 28 minutes, he took out the nuclear facilities in Iran, and then almost immediately people said this is going to be an endless war. And then he said, we're now having a ceasefire. And it didn't continue. So he's got that ability to use force, but in conditions and in aspects that favor our strengths rather than getting bogged down in the streets of Baghdad or something like that.
Yeah, and by the way, taking fire from the isolationist wing of his own right flank. You mentioned the 12-day war, the strikes against Iran. Trump and Bibi, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, where does this partnership, Victor, rank in the historic annals? I think of perhaps Reagan, Thatcher, Pope John Paul II working together to bring down the Soviet Empire during the 80s. Now the Iranian Empire on the ropes, thanks to this Trump-Bibi partnership. I think back Churchill, FDR during World War II. What do you make of this partnership, this very close partnership between Trump and Netanyahu, and what they've been able to accomplish and what they may still accomplish? The Abraham Accords back on the table, and a lot of things it seems to look forward to.
Yeah, I think your examples are just right. Thatcher, Reagan, and even it's a little bit more fundamental, Churchill and Roosevelt. But this idea that two allies in the West coordinate and synchronize. And in the case of these two, I don't think the United States could have gone in for just a few minutes and taken out that facility if Netanyahu had not first, for essentially over a week, had taken out the air defenses, he'd taken out the Air Force, he'd taken out a lot of the anti-missiles, aircraft missiles. And by the same token, I don't think Netanyahu could have completely done the damage that we did because he lacked the ordnance and the bombers to do that. So they kind of synchronized each other and complemented. That was misunderstood. A lot of critics on the right said that, and the left said that Trump was Bibi's puppet, and people said that Bibi was just a slave to Trump. But it was actually a pretty good partnership where they matched their respective skills, and they took in consideration their own domestic constituencies. So they did a good job.
Yeah, they've accomplished a lot together, needless to say, during Trump's first term, of course, and now in the second term already. And with the Abraham Accords seemingly back on the table, Saudi Arabia, others, could be some optimistic times in the world's most chaotic region, the Middle East, for the first time in a long time. Victor, we were talking before the break about President Trump basically conducting chemotherapy here in the United States and extracting some of these cancerous tumors that have set in over the years. One of those tumors is undoubtedly this woke movement. From DEI to gender madness, the list goes on and on. Do you get the sense now that, God willing, wokeism may be on the decline and on the ropes?
Yeah, I do. And I do because it's fundamentally illegal, as we know from the civil rights legislation of the 1960s. Title IX, Title V, Title VII of civil rights codes. But more importantly, the 2023 Supreme Court reaffirmation that you could not use race for admissions, hiring, tenure as it pertained to university, but it was interpreted for everything. And so what I'm getting at is Trump just reminded the country that you cannot have separate graduations, you cannot have separate dorms predicated on race. The universities thought they were bigger than the law, and I don't think they really understood that when Trump confronted them on a variety of issues, from surcharges that were exorbitant to this race-based policies they had, to not following the Bill of Rights and the First Amendment, et cetera, that they didn't realize that he had the public on his side, and he had the law on his side. And I think you're seeing now that a lot of these universities are trying to strike some kind of deal before they face severe federal penalties.
Yeah, you are a professor, of course. You know the university system
Yes.
very well. Can you talk more about, you've seen it up close, the moral rot, I'm sad to say, in our elite universities? We're talking Ivy League. We've seen the pro-Hamas mobs, obviously, on the streets. The moral rot in our universities, and President Trump now, again, trying to extract that. But how deep of a hole has been dug at our universities? Is there any hope to turn them around? It's probably, it seems, a long-term project.
Yeah, it is. At Stanford, we had 4 months of pro-Hamas people camping out illegally overnight, day after day on campus. They ripped down Jewish students' posters. A faculty task force, very liberal, found there was endemic anti-Semitism at Stanford, as there is in the Ivy League. We're going to have to really address about 6 or 7 things, and I think we're going to have to tax endowment. That was in the big beautiful bill. They're in the big beautiful bill and Trump's executive order. They're not going to be able to charge the government 55% on grants. I had a federal grant a couple of times, and believe me, you can 15% is all the university needs as overhead. And if they're going to be political, this tax on the endowment will remind them of that. They're going to have to comply with executive orders about anti-Semitism. They have over 300,000 foreign students that pay premium 110% of tuition, room, and board. They count on that. But the problem is that the majority of those students are from illiberal regimes, either in China or the Middle East, and they've really affected the universities because the university wants their money and they give them undue latitude. They don't enforce the law when they break campus rules and protocols. So they've got a real problem, and I think 95% of the professors from most studies are left wing, and so uh, they just don't want the public to know about all this. That's why everybody thought Donald Trump was wrong to confront them. But some of us in the university knew that if he did, and this was exposed to the public, they'd be shocked about choosing the race of your roommate in advance, as they do in some colleges, things like that. The public just had no stomach for.
Yeah, it's a world turned upside down. And Victor, 95% of these professors are left wing. That about says it all.
Yes.
I think it's about accountability, as you've been laying out, and also leverage. Donald Trump's got all the leverage, and he's not afraid to use it. That includes with the university system. That also includes with our NATO allies and Europe. As you scan Europe right now and you scan the West, what's your take on the state of Judeo-Christian Western civilization? The United States under Trump, obviously, a bastion, an island of sanity, it seems. But Western Europe, you look at London, you look at Paris, seems to be in dire straits in many ways. How do you see it?
I'm very worried about Europe. I hope they can make their promises about NATO spending, but they're going to have fundamental change. They have the wherewithal to do that. They have open borders. 15 to 16% of the population is Islamic in many of these countries. They're not assimilated or integrated into the body politic. Their Green New Deal type of energy pivots have pretty much destroyed the competitiveness of European industry. They pay about double the rates of electricity because of their reliance on subsidized wind and solar as we do. And they were essentially underarmed or even unarmed until recently. And I don't know how they're going to make their 5% promises in a few years when they have open borders. Their fertility rate is worse than ours. We went from 2.1 to about 1.78. They're down to 1.4, 1.5. So they're not they're going to lose millions of people, and yet they're bringing in people from foreign countries, often illegally, that are antithetical to their values. So let's hope that they'll find somebody like Trump or Reagan. And you see a little bit in Eastern Europe and in Italy and Holland, but maybe these conservative renaissances can do something about France and Germany and the UK, because they're in dire straits.
Truly, truly, Victor, well said, and God willing, to what you just laid out. Great job as always, folks. No one does it better. Victor Davis Hanson. Check him out at victorhanson.com, on X, across social media. Victor, we can't thank you enough. Great breakdown. Thanks. God bless you. We'll see you again soon. Stakelbeck Tonight, my all-new nightly series on current events through a bold biblical lens. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching, and God bless.